to Mastering Your Mind, How to Run Your Brain. Henry Ford once said, "Don't find fault, find a remedy." This chapter is about finding remedies. We've talked so far about what you should change if you wish to change your life. What kind of states empower you and what kind of states leave you limp. In this section, you're going to learn how to change your states so you can produce whatever you want, when you want it. People don't usually lack resources, they lack control over their resources. This chapter will teach you how to be in control, how to get more juice out of life, how to change your states, your actions, and thus the results you produce in your body, all in a matter of moments. The model of change that I teach and that NLP teaches is very different from the one used in many schools of therapy. The therapeutic canon, a pastiche of assorted schools, is so familiar that it's becoming something of a cultural totem. A large number of therapists believe that in order to change, you have to go back to deep-seated negative experiences and experience them again. The idea is that people have negative experiences in life that build up inside of them like a liquid until finally there's no more room and they burst or overflow. The only way to get in touch with this process, the therapists say, is to re-experience the events and pain all over again and then to try to let it go once and for all. Everything in my experience tells me that's one of the least effective ways to help people with their problems. In the first place, when you ask people to go back and re-experience some terrible trauma, you're putting them into the most painful, least resourceful state they can be in. If you put someone in an unresourceful state, their chances of producing new resourceful behaviors and results are greatly diminished. In fact, this approach may even reinforce the painful or unresourceful pattern. By continually accessing neurological states of limitation and pain, it becomes more easier to trigger these states in the future. The more you relieve an experience, the more likely you are to use it again. Maybe that's why so many traditional therapies take so long to produce results. I have some good friends who are therapists. They sincerely care about their patients. They believe that what they're doing is making a difference. It is. Traditional therapy does produce results. However, the question is, could these results be produced with less pain for the patient and in a shorter period of time? The answer is yes. If we model the actions of the most effective therapists in the world, which is exactly what Bandler and Grinder did. In fact, by mastering a simple understanding of how your brain works, you can become your own therapist, your own personal consultant. You go beyond therapy to being able to change any feeling, emotion, or behavior for yourself in a matter of moments. Producing more effective results begins, I believe, with creating a new model for the process of change. If you believe your problems store up inside of you until they overflow, that's exactly what you'll experience. Instead of all the pain building up like some lethal fluid, I see our neurological activity as more like a jukebox. What really happens is that human beings keep having experiences that are being recorded. We store them in the brain like records in a jukebox. As with the records in a jukebox, our recordings can be played back at any time if the right stimulus in our environment is triggered, if the right button is pushed. So we can choose to remember experiences or push buttons that play songs of happiness and joy, or we can push buttons that create pain. If your therapeutic plan involves hitting the button that creates pain time and again, you may be reinforcing the very negative state you wish to change. I think you need to do something completely different. Perhaps you could simply reprogram your jukebox so it plays a completely different song. You hit the same button, but instead of playing the sad song, it brings up an ecstatic one instead. Or else you could re-record over the disk. You could take the old memories and change them. The point is, the records that aren't being played are not going to build up and explode. That's absurd. And just as it's a simple procedure to reprogram a jukebox, it's easy to change the ways we produce unresourceful feelings and emotions. We don't have to experience all that remembered pain to change our state. What we have to do is change the internal representation from a negative to a positive one that is automatically triggered and causes us to produce more effective results. We have to rev up the circuits to ecstasy and turn off the juice of the circuits to pain. NLP looks at the structure of human experience, not the content. While we can be and are sympathetic from a personal point of view, we don't give a damn about what happened. What we do care very much about is how you put together in your mind what happened. What's the difference between how you produce the state of depression or the state of ecstasy? The main difference is the way you structure your internal representations. Anthony Robbins once said, "Nothing has any power over me other than that which I give it through my conscious thoughts." We structure our internal representations through our 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. In other words, we experience the world in the form of visual, auditory, kinesthetic, gustatory, or olfactory sensations. So whatever experiences we have stored in the mind are represented through the senses, primarily through the 3 major modalities: the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic messages. These modalities are broad groupings of the way we form internal representations. You might consider your 5 senses or representational systems the ingredients from which you build any experience or result. Remember that if anyone is able to produce a particular result, that result is created by a specific actions, both mental and physical. If you duplicate the exact same actions, you can duplicate the results that person produces. In order to produce a result, you must know what ingredients are necessary. The ingredients of all human experiences are derived from our 5 senses or modalities. However, it's not enough just to know what ingredients are needed. To produce the precise result you want, you must know exactly how much of each ingredient is needed. If you put in too much or too little of any particular ingredient, you will not produce the kind and quality of result you want. When human beings want to change something, they usually want to change one or both of 2 things: how they feel, that is, their state, and or how they behave. For example, a smoker often wants to change how he physically and emotionally feels, that's the state, and also his behavioral pattern of reaching for cigarette after cigarette. In the chapter on the power of state, we made it clear that there are 2 ways to change people's states and thus their behaviors. Either to change their physiology, which will change how they feel and the kind of behavior they produce, or to change their internal representations. This chapter is about learning how to specifically change the way we represent things so that they empower us to feel and to produce the kinds of behavior that support us in the achievement of our goals. There are 2 things we can change about our internal representations. We can change what we represent. Thus, for example, if we imagine the worst possible scenario, we can change to picturing the best possible scenario. Or we can change how we represent something. Many of us have certain keys within our own mind that trigger our brain to respond in a particular way. For example, some people find that picturing something as being very, very large motivates them greatly. Other people find that the tone of voice they use when they talk to themselves about something makes a major difference in their motivation. Almost all of us have certain key sub-modalities that trigger immediate responses within us. Once we discover the different ways we represent things and how they affect us, we can take charge of our own mind and begin to represent things in a way that empowers rather than limits us. If someone produces a result that we would like to model, we need to know more than the fact that he pictured something in his mind and said something to himself. We need sharper tools to really access what's going on in the mind. That's where submodalities come in. They are like the precise amounts of ingredients required to create a result. They are the smallest and most precise building blocks that make up the structure of human experience. To be able to understand and thus control a visual experience, we need to know more about it. We need to know if it's bright or dark, in black and white or in color, moving or stationary. In the same way, we'd want to know if an auditory communication is loud or quiet, near or far, resonant or tiny. We'd want to know if a kinesthetic experience is soft or hard, sharp or smooth, flexible or stiff. I've made a list of submodalities below. Another important distinction is whether an image is associated or disassociated. An associated image is one you experience as if you were really there. You see it through your own eyes, hear and feel what you would if you were actually at that time and place in your own body. A disassociated image is one you experience as if you were watching it from outside yourself. If you see a disassociated image of yourself, it's like watching a movie of yourself. So take a minute to remember a recent pleasant experience you've had. Actually, step into that experience. See what you saw through your own eyes, the event, images, colors, brightness, and so on. Hear what you heard, the voices, sounds, and so on. Feel what you felt, emotions, temperature, and so on. Experience what that's like. Now step out of your body and feel yourself stepping away from the situation, but from a place where you can still see yourself over there in the experience. Imagine the experience as if you were watching yourself in a movie. What's the difference in your feelings? In which were the feelings most intense? The first example or the second? The difference between this is the difference between an associated experience and a disassociated experience. By using submodality, distinctions like association versus disassociation, you can radically change your experience of life. Remember, we've learned that all human behavior is the result of the state we're in, and that our states are created by our internal representations, the things we picture, say to ourselves, and so on. Just as a movie director can change the effect his movie has on an audience, you can change the effect any experience in life has upon yourself. A director can change the camera angle, the volume and type of music, the speed and amount of movement, the color and quality of the image, and thus create any state he wants in his audience. You can direct your brain in the same way to generate any state or behavior that supports your highest goals or needs. Let me show you how. It's very important that you do these exercises, so you might want to read each one through. Then stop and actually do it before reading on. It might be fun to do the exercises with someone else. Take turns giving the cues and responding to them. I want you to think of a very pleasant memory. It can be a recent or distant. Just close your eyes, relax, and think of it. Now take that image and make it brighter and brighter. As the image brightens, be aware of how your state changes. Next, I want you to bring your mental picture closer to you. Now stop and make it bigger. What happens when you manipulate the image? It changes the intensity of the experience, doesn't it? For the vast majority of people, making an already pleasant memory bigger and brighter and closer creates an even more powerful image and more pleasant. It increases the power and pleasure of the internal representation. It puts you in a much more powerful, more joyous state. All people have access to the three modalities or representational systems: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. But people rely to different degrees on different representational systems. Many people access their brain primarily in a visual framework. They react to the pictures they see in their head. Others are primarily auditory, others kinesthetic. These people react most strongly to what they hear or feel. So after you varied the visual frames, let's try the same thing with the other representational systems. Bring back the pleasant memory we've worked with so far. Raise the volume of the voices or sounds you hear. Give them more rhythm, more bass, a change in timbre. Make them stronger and more affirmative. Now do the same with the kinesthetic submodalities. Make the memory warmer and softer and smoother than it was before. What happens to your feelings about the experience now? Not all people respond in the same ways. Kinesthetic cues in particular elicit different responses in different people. Most of you probably found that something the image brighter or larger enhanced it. It gave the internal representation more intensity, made it more appealing, and more important, it put you in a more positive and more resourceful state. When I do these exercises in counseling sessions, I can see exactly what's happening in a person's mind just by watching this physiology. His breathing gets deeper, his shoulders straighten, his face relaxes, and his whole body seems more alert. Let's try the same thing with a negative image. I want you to think of something that upset you and caused you pain. Now take that image and make it brighter. Bring it closer to you. Make it bigger. What's going on in your brain? Most people find that their negative state has intensified. The bad feelings they felt before are more powerful than ever. Now put the image back where it was. What happens if you make it smaller and dimmer and further away? Try it and know the difference in your feelings. You'll discover that the negative feelings have lost their power. Try the same thing with the other modalities. Hear your own internal voice or whatever's going on in the experience in a loud and staccato tone. Feel the experience as hard and firm. Chances are the same thing will happen. The negative feeling will be intensified. Again, I don't want you to understand this in an academic fashion. I want you to do these exercises in a focused, intense way, being careful to note which modalities and submodalities have the most power for you. You might want to run through these steps again in your mind, being aware of how the manipulation of the image changes your feelings about it. Take the negative image you began with and now make it smaller. Be aware of what happens as the image shrinks. Now defocus it, make it fuzzier, dimmer and harder to see. Now move it away from you, push it back so you can barely see it. Finally, take the image and push it back into an imaginary sun. Notice what you hear and see and feel as it disappears from the world. Do the same thing with the auditory modality. Bring down the volume of the voices you hear. Make them more legitic. Take away their rhythm and snap. Do the same thing with your kinesthetic perceptions. Make the image feel sort of wispy and insubstantial fallacy. What happens to the negative image when you go through this process? If you're like most people, the image loses its power. It becomes less potent, less painful, or even non-existent. You can take something that has caused great pain in the past and make it important, make it dissolve and disappear completely. I think you can see from this brief experience just how powerful this technology can be. In just a few minutes, you've taken a positive feeling and made it stronger and more empowering. You've also been able to take a powerful negative image and strip it of its power over you. In the past, you've been at the mercy of the results of your internal representations. Now you should know that things don't have to work that way. Basically, you can live your life one of two ways. You can let your brain run you the way it has in the past, or you can let it flash you any picture or sound or feeling, and you can respond automatically on cue like a Pavlovian and a dog responding to a hail. Or you can choose to consciously run your brain yourself. You can implant the cues you want. You can take bad experiences and images and sap them off your strength and power. You can represent them to yourself in a way that no longer overpowers you, a way that cuts them down to a size where you know you can effectively handle things. Haven't we all experienced a job or task so big that we didn't feel like we'd ever get done, so we didn't even begin? If you imagine the task as being a small picture, you'll feel like you can handle it, and you'll take the appropriate action instead of being overwhelmed. I know that may sound like a simplification, yet when you try this, you'll discover that changing your representations can change how you feel about a task and thus modify your actions. And of course, you now know that you can also take good experiences and enhance them. You can take the little joys of life and make them bigger, brighten up your vision of the day, and feel yourself become lighter and happier. What we have here is a way to create more juice, more joy, and more order in life. William Shakespeare once said, "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Remember, in the first chapter, how we talked about the commodity of kings, the king that had that ability to direct his kingdom. Well, your kingdom is your brain. Just as the king can run his kingdom, you can run yours if you begin to take control of how you represent your experience of life. All the sub-modalities we've dealt with tell the brain how to feel. Remember, we don't know how life really is. We only know how we represent life to ourselves. So if we have a negative image that's presented in big, bright, potent, resonant form, the brain gives us a whooper of a big, bright, potent, resonant, bad experience. But if we take that negative image and shrink it, darken it, make it a still frame, then we take away its power and the brain will respond accordingly. Instead of it putting us in a negative state, we can just shrug it off or deal with it without giant upset. Our language gives us many examples of the power of our representations. What do we mean when we say that a person has a bright future? How do you feel when a person says the future looks dim? What are you saying when you talk about shedding light on a subject? What do we mean when we say someone blew something out of proportion or has a distorted image of something? What do people mean when they say something weighs heavily on their mind or they feel they have a mental block? What do you mean when you say that something sounds about right or rings a bell or that everything is clicked? We tend to assume those phrases are just metaphors. They are not. They're usually quite precise descriptions of what's going on inside the mind. Think back to a few minutes ago when you took an unpleasant memory and enlarged it. Remember how it accentuated the negative aspects of the experience and put you in a negative state. Can you find a better way to describe that experience than to say you blew it out of proportion? So we instinctively know how powerful our mental images are. Remember that we can control our brain. It doesn't have to control us. Here's a simple exercise that helps many people. Have you ever been plagued by an insistent internal dialogue? Have you ever been in a position where your brain wouldn't shut up? Lots of times our brain runs dialogues over and over again. We debate points with ourselves or try to win old arguments or settle old scores. If that happens to you, just turn down the volume. Make the voice in your head softer, further away and weaker. That takes care of the problem for many people. Or do you have one of those internal dialogues that's always limiting you? Now hear it say the same things, only in a sexy voice, in an almost flirtatious tone and tempo. You can't do that. How does it feel now? You may feel that you're even more motivated to do what the voice is telling you not to. Try it now and experience the difference. Let's run through another exercise. This time, think of something in your experience that you were totally motivated to do. Relax and form as clear a mental picture of that experience as possible. Now I'm going to ask you some questions about it. Pause and answer each question one by one. There are no right or wrong answers. Different people will respond in different ways. As you look at the image, do you see a movie or a snapshot? Is it in color or black and white? Is it close or far away? Is it to the left, to the right, or in the center? Is it high, low, or in the middle of your field of vision? Is it associated? Do you see it through your own eyes, or is it disassociated? Do you see it like an outsider viewing it? Does it have a frame around it, or do you see a panorama that goes on forever? Is it bright or dim, or dark or light? Is it focused or unfocused? As you do this exercise, be sure to note that submodalities are the strongest for you. Which ones have the most power when you focus on them? Now run through your auditory and kinesthetic submodalities. When you hear what's going on, do you hear your own voice or do you hear the voices of others in the scene? Do you hear a dialogue or a monologue? Are the sounds you hear loud or quiet? Do they have varied inflections or are they a monotone? Are they rhythmic or staccato? Is the tempo slow or rapid? Do the sounds come or go, or do they keep up a steady commentary? What's the main thing you're hearing or saying to yourself? Where is the sound located? Where is it coming from? When you feel it, is it hard or soft? Is it warm or cool? Is it rough or smooth? Is it flexible or rigid? Is it a solid or liquid? Is it sharp or dull? Where is the feeling located in your body? Is it sour or sweet? Some of those questions may seem difficult to answer at first. If you have a tendency to form your internal representations primarily in a kinesthetic way, you may have thought to yourself, I don't make pictures. Remember, that's a belief, and as long as you hold it, it will be true. As you become more aware of your own modalities, you'll learn to improve your perceptions by something called overlap. Now that means if you're primarily auditory, for example, you'll do the best by looking into all the auditory cues you use to grasp and experience. So you might first remember what you were hearing at that time. Once you're in that state and you have a rich, powerful internal representation, it's much easier to ease into a visual frame to work on visual submodalities or into a kinesthetic frame to experience the kinesthetic and submodalities. Okay, you've just seen and experienced the structure of something that you once were strongly motivated to do. Now I want you to think of something you would like to be strongly motivated to do, something that at present you have no special feeling for, no real motivation to do. Once again, form a mental image. Now run through the exact same question, being careful to note the way your responses differ from those that you had for the thing you were strongly motivated to do. For example, as you look at the image, do you see a movie or a snapshot? Then continue to run through all of the visual submodality questions. Now run through your auditory and kinesthetic modality questions. As you do this, be sure to note which submodalities are stronger for you, which ones have the most power to affect your states. Now take the thing you were motivated by, let's call it an experience number 1, and the thing you want to be motivated by as experience number 2, and look at them simultaneously. It's not hard to do. Think of your brain as a split-screen TV and look at both images at the same time. There are differences in the submodalities, aren't they? We can predict this, of course, because different representations produce different types of results in the nervous system. Now take what we've learned about which kinds of submodalities motivate us and then, bit by bit, readjust the submodalities of the thing you were not yet motivated to do, like in experience number 2, so that they match those of the thing you were motivated to do, the submodalities of experience number 1. Again, this will be different for different people, but chances are the image of experience number 1 will be brighter than that of experience number 2. It will be clearer and closer, and I want you to concentrate on the differences between them and manipulate the sound representation so it becomes more and more like the first one. Remember to do the same thing with the auditory and kinesthetic representations as well. Do this now. How do you feel about the experience number 2 now? Are you more motivated by it? You should be, if you match the submodalities of experience number 1 with those of experience number 2. For example, if experience number 1 was a movie and experience number 2 was a still frame, you made experience number 2 into a movie. And continue the process with all the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic submodalities. When you find the specific triggers or the submodalities that cause you to go into a desirable state, then you can link these triggers to undesirable states and thereby change them in a moment. Remember, similar internal representations will create similar states or feelings, and similar feelings or states will trigger similar actions. Also, if you find out what specifically makes you feel motivated to do just about anything, you then know exactly what you have to do with any experience to make yourself feel motivated. From that motivated state, you can get yourself to take effective action. It's important to note that certain key submodalities affect us more than others. For example, I worked with a young boy who was unmotivated to go to school. Most of the visual submodalities did not seem to move him much. However, if he said certain words to himself in a certain tone of voice, he found himself immediately motivated to go to school. In addition, when he was motivated, he felt tension in his biceps. However, when he was not motivated or was angry, he had tension in his jaw, and his tone of voice was quite different. Simply by changing these two submodalities alone, I could take him almost instantly from a state of being upset or unmotivated to a state of being motivated. The same thing can be done with food. One woman absolutely loved chocolate because of its texture, its creaminess and its smoothness. Yet she hated grapes because they were crunchy. All I had to do was to have her image eating a grape slowly, biting into it slowly and feeling the texture as it rolled around in her mouth. I also had her say the same things with the same tonality. By doing this, she immediately began to desire and enjoy grapes, and has ever since. As a modeler, you always want to be curious about how someone is able to produce any result, mental or physical. For example, people will come to me for counseling and say, "I'm so depressed." I don't ask, "Why are you depressed?" and then ask them to represent to themselves and me why they are. That would just put them into a depressed state. I don't want to know why they're depressed, but I want to know how they're depressed. I'll ask them instead, "How do you do that?" Usually I get a startled look because the person doesn't realize that you have to do certain things in your mind and physiology to get depressed. So I'll ask, if I were in your body, how would I get depressed? What would I picture? What would I say to myself? How would I say it? What tonality would I use? These processes create specific mental and physical actions and thus specific emotional results. If you change the structure of a process, it can become something else, something other than a depressed state. Once you know how you do things with your new awareness, you can start running your own brain and creating the states that support you in living the quality of life you desire and deserve. Example, how do you get frustrated or depressed? Do you take something and make a towering image of it in your mind? Do you keep talking to yourself in a sad tone of voice? Now, how do you create ecstatic feelings, fun? Do you make bright pictures? Do you move fast or slow? What tone of voice do you use when you speak to yourself? Suppose someone seems to love work and you don't, but would like to find out what he does to create that feeling. You'll be astonished at just how fast you're able to change. I've seen people who've been in therapy for years change their problem states, their behaviors, often in only minutes. After all, frustration, depression, and ecstasy aren't things. They are processes created by specific mental images, sounds, and physical actions that you consciously or unconsciously control. Do you realize how using these tools in an effective way could change your life? If you love the feeling of challenge that your work gives you but you hate to clean the house, you can do one of two things. Hire a housekeeper or know the difference between how you represent work and how you represent cleaning the house. By representing the house cleaning and challenging work in the same submodalities, you will feel an immediate drive to clean. This might be a nice one to give your children. What if you were to take all these things you hate to do but believe you must and attach to them the submodalities of pleasure? Remember, few things have any inherent feeling. You've learned what is pleasurable and you've learned what is uncomfortable. You can simply relabel these experiences in your brain and immediately create a new feeling about them. What if you took all your problems, shrank them down, and put a little distance between them and you? The possibilities are endless. You're in command. It's important to remember that, like any skill, this takes repetition and practice. The more often you consciously cue the simple and submodality shifts, the better you'll get at quickly producing the result you want. You may find that changing the brightness or dimness of an image has a stronger effect on you and than changing its location or size. Once you know this, you'll know that brightness should be one of the first things to manipulate when you want to change something. Some of you may be thinking these submodality changes are great, but what's going to keep them from changing back? I know I can change how I feel at the moment, and that's valuable, but it would be great if I had a way to make change more automatic and more consistent. The way to do this is through a process we call the Swiss pattern. It can be used to deal with some of the most persistent problems and bad habits people have. A Swiss pattern takes internal representations that normally produce states of unresourcefulness and causes them to automatically trigger new internal representations that put you in the resourceful states you desire. When you find out, for example, what internal representations make you feel like overeating, with the Swiss pattern, you can create a new internal representation of something else that is more powerful and would cause you, if you saw or heard it, to push food away. If you link the two representations, whenever you think of overeating, the first representation will instantly trigger the second and put you in a state of not desiring food. The best part of the Swiss pattern is that once you implant it effectively, you don't have to think of it ever again. The process will happen automatically without any conscious effort. Here's how the Swiss pattern works. Step number 1. Identify the behavior you want to change. Now make an internal representation of that behavior as you see it through your own eyes. If you want to stop biting your fingernails, imagine a picture of you lifting your hand, bringing your fingers to your lips and biting your nails. Step number 2. Once you have a clear picture of the behavior you want to change, you need to create a different representation, a picture of yourself as you would be able to make the desired change and what that change would mean to you. You might picture yourself taking your fingers away from your mouth, creating a little pressure on the finger you were going to bite, and seeing your nails perfectly manicured and yourself as well dressed, magnificently groomed, more in control and more confident. The picture you make of yourself in the desired state should be disassociated. The reason for this is that we want to create an ideal internal representation, one that will continue to be drawn to rather than one you feel you already have. Step number 3, Swiss. The two pictures so that the unresourceful experience automatically triggers the resourceful experience. Once you hook up this triggering mechanism, anything that used to trigger biting your nails will now trigger you into a state where you are moving toward that ideal picture of yourself. Thus, you are creating a whole new way of your brain to deal with what in the past may have upset you. Here's how to do the Swiss. Start by making a big bright picture of the behavior you want to change. Then in the bottom right hand corner of the picture, make a small dark picture of the way you want to be. Now take the small picture and in less than 1 second, have it grown in size and brightness and literally brush through the picture of the behavior you no longer desire. As you do this process, say the word whoosh with all the excitement and enthusiasm you can. I realize this may sound a bit juvenile. However, saying whoosh in an excited way sends a series of powerful positive signals to your brain. Once you've set up the pictures in your mind, this whole process should take about as long as it takes to say the word whoosh. Now in front of you is a big, bright, focused, colorful picture of how you want to be. The old picture of how you were has been smashed to smithereens. The key to this pattern is speed and repetition. You must see and feel that small, dark picture become huge and bright and explode through the big picture, destroying it and replacing it with an even bigger, brighter picture of how you want things to be. Now experience the great feeling of seeing things the way you want them. Then open your eyes for a split second in order to break the state. When you close your eyes again, do the Swiss once more. Start by seeing the thing you want to change as large, and then have your small picture grow in size and brightness and explode through whoosh. Pause to experience it. Open your eyes, close your eyes, see what you want to change. See the original picture and how you want to change it. Whoosh it again. Do this 5 or 6 times as fast as you can. Remember, the key to this is speed and to have fun doing it. What you are telling your brain is, see this, whoosh, do this, see this, whoosh, do this, see this, whoosh, do this, until the old picture automatically triggers the new picture, the new states, and thus the new behavior. Now make the first picture and what happens. If, for example, you switch the pattern of biting your fingernails, then when you imagine yourself biting them, you would find it hard to do. It actually would feel unnatural. If not, you would run the pattern again. This time, you would do it more clearly and more rapidly, being certain to experience only for a moment the positive feeling you get from the new picture before opening your eyes and beginning the process again. It may not work if the picture you choose to move and toward isn't exciting or desirous enough. It's very important that it be extremely attractive, something that puts you in a motivated or desirous state, something you really want or something that is more important to you than the old behavior. Sometimes it helps to add new submodalities like smell or taste. The Swiss pattern produces results amazingly quickly because of certain tendencies of the brain. Our brain tends to move away from unpleasant things and toward pleasant ones. By making the picture of no longer needing to bite your fingernails much more appealing than the picture of needing to bite them, you've given your brain a powerful signal about what kind of behavior to move toward. I did this for myself to stop my fingernail biting. It had been a totally unconscious habit. The day after I did this Swiss pattern, I suddenly caught myself starting to chew my fingers. I could have looked at that as a failure. Instead, I saw my becoming conscious of my habit as progress. Then I simply did 10 Swiss patterns, and I've never thought to bite my nails again. You can also do this with fears or frustrations. Take something you're afraid to do. Now picture it working out the way you want it to. Make this picture really exciting. Now swish the two of them 7 times. Now think of the thing you feared. How does it make you feel now? If the Swiss pattern has been done effectively, the moment you think of the things you feared, you should automatically switch to thinking of how you want things to be. Another variation of the Swiss pattern is to imagine a slingshot in front of you. Between the two posts is a picture of the present behavior you want to change. Place a small picture of how you want to be in the sling. Then mentally watch this little picture being pulled up further and further back until the sling is stretched as far as possible. Then let it go. Watch as it explodes right through the old picture in front of you and into your brain. It's important that when you do this, you mentally pull the sling all the way back before letting it go. You still say the word whoosh as you release it and break through the whole limiting picture of yourself. If you've done this correctly, when you let go of the sling, the picture should come at you so fast that your head actually snaps back. Stop right now and take a moment to think of some of the limiting thought or behavior you would like to change, and use this slingshot Swiss pattern to change it. Remember that your mind can defy the laws of the universe in one crucial way. It can go backward. Time can't. Nor can events, but your mind can. Let's say you go into your office and the first thing you notice is that an important report you needed was not written. The incomplete report tends to put you in a less than resourceful state. You feel mad. You feel frustrated. You're ready to go out and scream at your secretary. But screaming won't produce the result you want. It will only make a bad situation worse. The key is to change your state, to back up and put yourself in a state that will allow you to get things done. That's what you can do by rearranging your internal representations. I've talked throughout the book of being a sovereign, being in control, running your own brain. Now you're seeing the way to do it. In just a few exercises we've done so far, you've seen that you have the ability to totally control your own state. Think what your life would be like if you remembered all your good experiences as looking bright, close and colorful, as sounding joyous, rhythmic and melodic, as feeling soft, warm and nurturing. And what if you stored your bad experiences as fuzzy little steel-framed images with almost inaudible voices and insubstantial forms you could not feel because they were far away from you? Successful people do this unconsciously. They know how to turn up the volume of the things that help them and turn off the sound of the things that don't. What you've learned in this chapter is how to model them. I'm not suggesting you ignore problems. Some things need to be addressed. We all know people who can go through a day in which 99 things worked out right and come home totally depressed. Why? Well, one thing went wrong. They may have turned the one thing that went wrong into a big, bright, blustery image and turned all the others into small, murky, quite unsubstantial ones. Lots of people spend their whole lives like this. I've had clients who tell me, I'm always depressed. They almost say it with pride because it's become so much a part of their worldview. Well, many therapists would begin with the long, arduous task of unearthing the causes of that depression. They'd let the patient talk for hours about his depression. They'd rummage through the patient's mental garbage bin to uncover seminal experiences of gloom and past emotional abuse. Of such techniques are very long and very expensive therapeutic relationships. No one is always depressed. Depression isn't a permanent condition like losing a leg. It's a state that people can pop into and out of. In fact, most people who are experiencing depression have had many happy experiences in their lives. Maybe even as many or more than the average person. They just don't represent these experiences to themselves in a bright, large, associated way. They may also represent happy times as far away instead of close. Take a moment now and remember an event that happened last week and push it far away. Does it seem as in recent experiences to you anymore? What if you bring it closer? Doesn't it now seem more recent? Some people take their happy experiences of the moment and push them far away so they seem like long ago, and store their problems up close. Haven't you ever heard a person say, I just need to get something distance from my problems? You don't have to fly to some distant land to do this. Just push them far away from you in your mind and notice the difference. People who feel depressed often have their brains filled to capacity with big, loud, close, heavy, inconsistent images of the bad times and only thin grey wafers for the good times. The way to change isn't to wallow in the bad memories. It's to change the submodalities, the very structure of the memories themselves. Next, link what used to make you feel bad to the new representations that make you feel like taking the challenges of life with vigor, humor, patience, and strength. Some people say, wait a second, and you can change things so quickly. Why not? Isn't often much easier to grasp something in a flash than over a long period of time? That's how the brain learns. Think of how you watch a movie. You view thousands of frames and put them together in a dynamic whole. What if you watched one frame and then an hour later at another, and then a day or two later watched a third? You wouldn't get anything out of it, would you? Personal change can work the same way. If you do something, if you make a change in your mind right now, if you change your state and your behavior, you can show yourself in the most dramatic way that's possible. That's a more potent jolt than months of anguished thought. Quantum physics tells us that things do not change slowly over time. They make quantum leaps. We jump from one level of experience to another. If you don't like how you feel, change what you represent to yourself. It's that simple. Let's look at another example. Love. Love, for most of us, is a wonderful, ethereal, almost mystical experience. It's also important from a modeling point of view to note that love is a state, and like all states, all results, it is produced by specific sets of actions or stimuli when they are perceived or represented in certain ways. How do you fall in love? One of the most important perceptual ingredients of falling in love is associating with all the things you love about someone and disassociating from the things you don't. Falling in love can be such a heady, disorienting feeling because it's not a balanced one. You're not making a balanced sheet of a person's good and bad qualities, running it through a computer and seeing what comes out. You're totally associated with a few elements of another person that you find intoxicating. You're not even aware in that moment, at least, or that person's faults. What ruins relationships? There are, of course, many factors. One may be that you no longer associate with the things that attracted you to that person in the first place. In fact, you may have gone so far as to associate with all the unpleasant experiences you've had with them and disassociate from the pleasant ones you've shared. How does this happen? A person may have noticed and made big pictures of his mate's habit of leaving the cap of the toothpaste or strewing air stuff on the floor. Maybe he no longer writes their love notes, or possibly she remembers what he said to her in the heat of an argument and she listens to that dialogue play over and over in her head, re-experiencing how it felt. She doesn't remember the gentle way he touched her and that on the special things he said in the previous week or what he did for her on her anniversary. The examples can go on and on. Bear in mind, there's nothing wrong with doing this. Just be clear that this pattern or representations will probably not empower your relationship. What if in the middle of an argument you remember the first time you kissed or held hands, a time when your lover did something really special for you and you made that picture big and close the bride again? From the state, how will you treat this person you love? It's critical that we look at any pattern of communication and ask ourselves regularly, if I continue to represent things to myself this way, what will likely to be the final result in my life? What direction is my present behavior taking me? And is that where I want to go? Now is the time to examine what my mental and physical actions are creating. You don't want to find out later that something you could simply and easily have changed led you down a path to a place you don't want to be. It might be valuable to note if you have a particular pattern of using association and disassociation. There are many people who spend most of their time disassociated from most of their representations. They seldom seem to be emotionally moved by everything. Disassociation has its advantage. If you keep out of too deep emotions about some things, you have some resources in handling them. However, if this is your consistent pattern of representing most of your experiences in life, you're really missing what I like to call the juice of life, a tremendous amount of joy. I've counseled conservative people who are limited in experience in expressing what they felt about their lives and set up new perceptual patterns for them. By greatly increasing their associated internal representations, they have come alive and found life to be a whole new experience. On the other end, if all or the vast majority of your internal representations are fully associated, you may find yourself an emotional misfit. You may have great difficulty coping with life because you feel every little thing and life isn't always fun or easy or exciting. A person who is fully associated with everything in life is extremely vulnerable and will usually take things too personally. The key to life is a balance in all things, including the perceptual filters of association and disassociation. We can associate with or disassociate from anything we want. The key is to associate consciously, so it helps us. We can control any representation to make in our brain. Remember what we learned about the power of our beliefs? We learned that we're not born with beliefs that they can change. What we were little, we believe some things that we think are ridiculous now. We finished the chapter on beliefs with a key question. How do we adopt the enabling beliefs and drop the negative ones? The first step was becoming aware of their powerful effects on our lives. You've been taking the second step throughout this chapter, changing the way you represent those beliefs to yourself. For if you change the structure of how you represent something to yourself, you will change how you feel about it and thus change what is true in your experience of life. You can represent things to yourself in a way that consistently empowers you. Now, remember, a belief is a strong emotional state of certainty that you hold about specific people, things, ideas, or experiences of life. How do you create that certainty? Through specific submodalities. Do you think you've be as certain about something that is dim, unfocused, tiny, and far away in your mind as you would be about something that is just the opposite? Also, your brain has a filing system. Some people store the things they believe on the left, things they're not sure about on the right. I know this sounds ridiculous, yet you can change a person who has this coding system simply by having him, for example, take the things he's not sure of from the right and put them on the left, where his brain files things he believes. As soon as he does, he begins to feel certain. He begins to believe in an idea or concept that only a moment ago he was uncertain about. This changing of beliefs is done simply by contrasting how you represent something you absolutely know to be true with something you're not sure of. Start with some belief you are totally sure of, that your name is John Smith, you are 25 years old and you were born in Atlanta, Georgia, or that you love your kids with all your heart, or that Miles Davis is the greatest trumpeter in history. Think of something you believe without reservation, something you totally convinced is true. Now think of something you're not sure of, something you want to believe but don't feel quite certain of now. You might want to use one of the 7 lies of success from chapter 5. Do not pick something you don't believe in at all, because saying you don't believe in something really means you believe that it is not true. Now run your submodalities as we did earlier when we dealt with motivation. Run through all the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic aspects of the thing you totally believe. Then do the same for the thing you're not so sure of. Be aware of the differences between them. Are the things you believe in found in one location and the things you're not certain of in another? Or are the things you believe closer or brighter or larger than the things you're not certain of? Is one a still frame, the other moving? Is one moving faster than the other? Now do what we did with motivation. Reprogram the submodalities of the thing you've not sure of so they match those of the thing you believe. Change the colors and the location. Change the voices, the tones, the tempos, the timbre of the sounds. Now change the submodalities of texture, weight, temperature. How do you feel when you're true? If you have accurately transformed the representation that used to cause uncertainty, you will be feeling certain about the very thing that only a moment ago you were not certain of. The only difficulty that most people have is they believe that you just can't change things that fast. This may be a belief you'll want to change as well. The same process can be used to discover the difference in your mind between things you're confused about and things you feel you understand. If you're confused about something, it may be because your internal representation is small, unfocused, dim, or far away, while the things you understand are represented as closer, brighter, and more focused. See what happens to your feelings when you change your representations to be exactly like those of the things you understand. Of course, bringing things closer or making them brighter does not intensify the experience for everyone. The opposite may be true. Some people feel things intensify when they get closer, darker, or more unfocused. The point is to find out which submodalities are the key ones for you or for the person you want to help to create change, and then to have enough personal power to follow through and use these tools. What we're really doing as we work with submodalities is relabeling the stimulus system that tells the brain how to feel about an experience. Your brain responds to whatever signals or submodalities you give it. If you provide signals of one type, the brain will feel pain. If you provide different submodalities, you can feel fine in a matter of moments. For example, while I was conducting a neurolinguistic professionals training in Phoenix, Arizona, I began to notice that a large number of people in the room showed a great deal of muscle tension in their faces, making expressions that I interpreted as expressing pain. I mentally reviewed what I had been talking about and found nothing that could have triggered such a response in so many people. So finally, I asked someone, "What are you feeling right now?" He said, "I've got a massive headache." And as soon as he said that, so did another person, and then another, and then another. More than 60% of the people in the room had headaches. They explained that the bright lights needed for videotaping were shining in their eyes, and they found it irritating, even painful. In addition, we were in a room without windows, and the ventilation had broken down about 3 hours earlier, so it was very scuffy. All these things had created a physiological shift in these people. So what I could do, send everyone out for an exerting? Of course not. The brain delivers pain only when it receives stimuli that are represented in a way that tells it to feel pain. So I had the people describe the submodalities of their pain. For some, it was heavy and throbbing. For others, not. Some felt pain very large and bright. You can imagine how that felt. While for some, it was small. I then had them change their submodalities of pain by first of all disassociating themselves from the pain and putting it outside themselves. Then I got them out of their feelings by having them see the shape and size of the pain and place it about 10 feet in front of them. Next, I had them make their representation bigger and smaller, causing it to grow and explode through the ceiling and then shrink way down. Then I had them push the pain into the sun and watch it melt to nothing and then come down to earth as sunshine to feed the plains. Finally, I asked them how they felt. In less than 5 minutes, and 95% no longer had a headache. They had changed their internal representations of what they were signaling the brain to do. So the brain, now getting new signals, was producing a new response. The remaining 5% took another 5 minutes to make more specific changes. One man had been experiencing a migraine and even he was feeling fine again. When I describe this process to some people, they have difficulty believing that they could eliminate their pain that quickly and easily. Yet, haven't you yourself done this unconsciously many times? Can you remember a time when you were feeling pain but then got caught up in doing something else or something exciting happened, and when you changed what you were thinking about or representing to your brain, you no longer felt the pain? Pain can simply go away and not come back again unless you start representing it to yourself. With a little bit of conscious direction of your internal representations, you can easily eliminate headaches at will. In fact, once you learn the signals that produce specific results in your brain, you can cause yourself to feel whatever way you'd like to feel about virtually anything. A final caveat. A larger set of filters on human experience can govern or affect your ability to maintain new internal representations, or even to make the changes in the first place. Those filters concern what we value most and what unconscious benefits we may have been receiving from our present behavior. The issue and importance of values in a chapter in itself, and we will discuss the unconscious secondary gain in chapter 16 on the process of reframing. If pain is sending you important signals about something you need to change in your body, then unless you address that need, the pain will most likely come back because it is serving you in an important way. With what you've learned so far, you can already tremendously enhance your own life as well as the life of anyone you know. Let's look at another aspect of the way we restructure our experience, a critical ingredient that can empower us to effectively model most anyone. Let's examine.